we could just pull up the provision figure in terms of how they've done in terms of provisions, though it's not that important because it's obviously a discretionary figure, but the provision figure also would just be important in terms of how that went, and it's a decline. It's a decline of 67% on a sequential basis at 600 crores versus 1817 crores. Kajal Gandhi of ICICI Securities joins in with her take on the numbers. Kajal, what have you made of Bank of Baroda's numbers, and what seems to have gone well for Bank of Baroda this quarter, because we're seeing a 3% uptake on the stock coming in?
Broadly, because NII profitability is seeming to be in line, and the GNP and NNP percentages are looking higher. It doesn't seem net additions are higher on an absolute basis, which the percentage may be higher because of growth may have come down sharply. But then broadly in that term, if the slippages and restructuring isn't very high, this looks to be a good set of number.
Okay, we have Mayuresh Joshi of Angel Broking joining in as well. Mayuresh, what's your take on the Bank of Baroda numbers? Do you think that it's relatively better than what the other banks have reported, and would you wait by to get a full analysis once the commentary of the management begins?
Mani, yes, I think clarity will be required, and in terms of NII growth and PAT growth, it has surpassed expectations. But clearly, as you rightfully mentioned, I think the clarity on restructuring and slippages is something that I would watch out for, and the management take on how the entire pipeline is looking, and specifically from the international book.
Okay. The gross NPA has risen above 4%. How would you read that, Mayuresh?
So it was always expected to rise, because asset quality, even in the con call in the last quarter, the management was very clear that the asset quality is expected to remain under pressure for the next 2 quarters. So I think it will be pertinent to understand where these slippages have come from. But again, I think the sluggish credit growth is something that a lot of these banks have adhered to this time around. But the important point is that the provisioning figure is much lower than what we had expected. So at 600 crores, if I'm seeing it correctly, it is much lower than the 1267 crores figure that we had anticipated.
So you were expecting provisions of over 1200 crores this quarter?
Oh yes, around 1267 crores to be precise.
Okay, and Kajal, what about you? Are you reading a lower provision figure sequentially as a positive?
Yes, we do, because we were expecting over 900 crore of provisions, and this has come 600 crore, which is actually incomparable to the June quarter last year. After that, it has been on the higher side only. So this is a good provision, and in spite of that, if the asset quality is maintained, it looks quite good. And NII also has not taken a knock, which means slippages should not be higher, because otherwise reversals would have impacted them.
Okay. How closely would you be watching out, Mayuresh, for this 525 refinancing pipeline for Bank of Baroda? Because we saw PNB rise on the day of its numbers, but fall the next day once we had more details on 525.
So yes, I think that item will be an important monitorable item for Bank of Baroda, and clearly again I think the important aspect would also be on where the bank perceives credit costs to be. So I think if the NII growth has been has held up, so slippages number will be lower than what the street was expecting, but clearly I think the slippages number has to be maintained. These 2-3 aspects need to get clarified by the management.
Mayuresh, what would be your expectations in terms of slippages, restructured structured assets this quarter?
So clearly I think that figure is a little bit on the higher side in our opinion, and if I look at the past quarter's performance for Bank of Baroda, this restructured assets in terms of fresh restructuring have been on the higher side. Okay. So in terms of absolute numbers, at least as on the quarter gone by, it was around 6.1% of the total advances given by the bank. So I think that number will also be a key monitorable in terms of, again, I think we are not expecting it to be higher than 4,000 crores this time around. It will be lesser than that.
Okay. Mayuresh, do you think that the stock is also being supported and or possibly even would continue to be supported by reports doing the rounds about a possible private banker coming on board for Bank of Baroda? So even if there is something from 525 which disappoints in terms of commentary or slippages or restructuring or anything of that sort, the stock would still be supported?
I think that would be one factor, but to speculative to comment on that. But yes, I think even the clarity on the appointment of an MD CEO would be important because from a public sector space, I think that clarity is a key thing to watch out for. So I think broadly, I think how the asset quality holds up is something we'll watch out for. Yes, I think the clarity on the MD CEO will be a welcome move if it comes sooner rather than later.
Okay, all right. So just to sum up the numbers then, Kajal, over to you. What have you liked? What is your rating in terms of the numbers which have been delivered by Bank of Baroda? Prima facie, from what you can see?
Prima facie, it appears we'll be maintaining our at least numbers on the bottom line, and since asset quality as of now doesn't look too bad, we'll be maintaining our positive stance. We had the last rating as buy on the stock, so we'll have to see broadly if we can maintain that.
Okay, and what about you, Mayuresh? Good, bad? How would you rate the numbers and your call?
So I think numbers in terms of how the provisioning has come out, the bottom line has been encouraging. However, I think we'll still wait on the few aspects that's discussed in terms of asset quality, how the restructuring pipeline, the fresh slippages, the credit cost expected by the management. So I think even the valuations are extremely supportive for Bank of Baroda. I think we will still remain neutral. We'll still wait for clarity from the management, then look at the numbers and then come out with the cost.
Okay, Mayuresh as well as Kajal, thanks very much for joining in. Well, just one more detail which I just wanted to point out. It is primarily a lower provision figure which has helped the bottom line, because this quarter even the other income is down 6% for Bank of Baroda. So that's coming at around 967 crores for the quarter. So despite that lack of support coming through, they've managed to deliver on the profit figure, which is still a decline but in line with what the street was working with.